Alright everybody, time for Werb to get back to his good old weekly paneling analysis. This week we're on chapter 1109? Wait, didn't we just do 1105? It's been a month? Copyright strikes? Shueisha deleted my channel? Well, you can check out the video I put out a few days ago if you want to know the details on that, but the good news is, we're back, so let's get back into business. One quick note, as part of a series of measures to reduce the risk of future copyright issues, the pages I show on screen will be filtered. That's why things are about to look very green. Let me know if you think it needs to be adjusted. Before we get to the action sequence in the second half of the chapter, we have to talk about how page 2 sets it up. The way the Marines are looking and shouting in opposite directions helps show the chaos that the Marines around the world are feeling, thanks to Vegapunk's broadcast. Oda usually aligns Marines in neat order, all facing the same direction, to show how they operate. Breaking that here adds just a little more to the feeling of panic that they're all under. Is it just me, or does this Marine look familiar? Anyway, we get a similar feeling with how Luffy is looking away from Saturn as he listens to the broadcast. Simple techniques like a character looking in a different direction from where they're facing are surprisingly effective for conveying specific feelings like distraction. But the real setup for the action later is in how the relative positions are shown. Luffy in the middle, holding Saturn on the right, and Kizaru on the left. The flow of the entire action scene is built on understanding these physical positions. As usual, it's consistent even with how their panels are arranged when we do jump back into the action. Luffy's panel is the largest, of course, to convey his dominance in this situation. Luffy leaning back to dodge Kizaru and Saturn's attacks is drawn with an incredibly strong circular composition. Why a circle? Because the two attacks are passing through the hole in the middle. It's a great composition to convey that Luffy isn't dodging by getting entirely out of the way, but rather by letting the attacks weave through his form. That circle is thicker on the bottom and has an open gap on the top, which helps it still convey that downward momentum in Luffy's motion. And by defining the whole page by a shape that aligns with Luffy's body, it maintains that he's the one in control of the situation. The attacks are crossing the circle, but they aren't defining the composition. The way Luffy pulls Saturn and Kizaru back exemplifies both the fun of drawing his rubber-based powers and the kind of paneling you need to show them well. The long, thin, horizontal panels, with Luffy's arms stretching across them and his victims at the far right end, makes us feel the tension of them being pulled to the left, the distance that they're about to cross as the eye moves with them. The tension pulling them to the left gets resolved by letting them fly over to the left of the next panel. But as Luffy still has them in hand, all we've done is replace it with more tension, ready to pull them back down to the right. Rubbery paneling. In particular, this panel sets them up at the top left corner, which gives us tension pulling them down and to the right, exactly the direction the eye will be moving in on the next page when Kizaru and Saturn finally get clapped. As usual, we have a shot of Luffy's face right before the attack lands. How characters feel is as important as what they do, and shots like this add to the pacing, like the feeling of a character hanging in the air for a brief moment before they fall to the ground. Because we've spent this whole sequence with Saturn on the right and Kizaru on the left, and had all of that directional tension built up, seeing them pulled forward and slammed together is as visceral and physical as it gets. The panels of them right before show Luffy's palms right next to each other, specifically to ready us to see them clap. I don't think the eye was meant to literally follow these two paths, but the way you can start from Saturn and follow along Luffy's arm into the impact and do the same with Kizaru is so satisfying. The way the impact stretches into the foreground makes it feel enormous and powerful, and the shaky way Luffy's fingers are drawn makes it feel like they're vibrating from the impact. The impact effect is drawn black instead of white as Oda more commonly does, to better contrast how bright Luffy's Gear 5 character design is. The impact effects going outward don't align with the impact itself, but rather with how sound waves could escape from the clap, emphasizing the loudness and through that the nature of the attack. We see that colossal sound shaking the landscape as the next panel pulls out into a wide shot, telling us that even though he might have just clapped them on a small scale, the power of the attack was on a huge scale. And of course, the panel is drawing us down towards the next one with how Luffy is positioned. I really like how the eye moves downward with Kizaru and Saturn's flattened forms. Aligning motion with the eye isn't just for when a character is running or throwing a punch. Here, it makes it feel like they're fluttering as they fall through the air. And from them, the eye moves up with Luffy's finger to poke into Saturn. It's worth mentioning how Oda uses panels to convey information. Both of these sequences function by showing us a small, limited version of a situation, then giving us a larger shot with the full details of what's happening. It keeps the reader engaged, using panels to raise questions that can be answered by the next one. One great way to analyze paneling is to always ask, does this panel have a clear and deliberate intent in what it wants to make you feel? I'm not sure what I can really say about Luffy spinning them like pizzas, other than to acknowledge that Oda's visual creativity is insane. Saturn literally comes spinning back at him later using his claws like a buzzsaw. I think we all have a legal obligation to call this attack the pizza slicer. Jumping to the end of the chapter, I love the way the new arrivals land. The huge black lightning, dwarfing even the buildings, contrasting the gray-shaded island with their darkness. Their angle is aligned with how Saturn is leaning, as he stops his spinning by digging his claws into the ground, which is a similar motion to how they're landing, while Luffy is leaning away, aligned against them. This panel feels huge, and Luffy is tiny. Luffy might be able to keep up with them in a fight, that much we still have to see, but he has stumbled into a conflict far larger than any he's been in before. He's standing on the world stage here. Part of what makes this panel feel so vast is a technique that I think Oda got from Dragon Ball. Early Dragon Ball loved grid-patterned floors to give a better sense of the physical space characters are fighting in, the distance between them, and how big the overall space is. We get that here, but the grid is also broken and disjointed, reminding us how Egghead is being destroyed by this conflict. I hope you liked the chapter and enjoyed this analysis. If you want to spite Shueisha for deleting my channel, then make sure to subscribe and like the video. Comment what panel in the chapter was your favorite, and follow my Twitter if you want to see dumb, goofy posts like the one you see on the screen. See ya!